Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel in Literature Gyan. Today in this video we will talk about most important fathers, founders, phrases and terms related to English literature. So let's start the video. First we will talk about a great figure in English literature, Geoffrey Chaucer. Friends, Geoffrey Chaucer is known as the father of English literature and John Dryden called him the father of English poetry. Friends, he is also known as father of English language, the morning star of the Renaissance, and the first national poet of England. He was the first writer to be buried at Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey, and Edmund Spenser called him the whale of English poetry. Next is Venerable Bede. Friends, Venerable Bede is known as the father of English learning and the father of English history. Next is Henry Fielding. He is known as the father of English novel, and it was Walter Scott who called him the father of English novel. In 1752, he founded a journal, the Covent Garden Journal. Next is King Alfred the Great. Friends, he is known as the father of English prose. Aeschylus is known as the father of tragedy, and Nicholas Udall is known as the first English comedy writer. Friends, the first English comedy written by Nicholas Udall is Ralph Doster, and it was published in 1566. Next, we will talk about a great essayist, Francis Bacon. Friends, Francis Bacon is known as the father of English essay, and Voltaire called him the father of the scientific method, and he is also known as the father of experimental science. John Wycliffe is known as the morning star of the Reformation. Next, we will talk about a great dramatist, William Shakespeare. Friends, William Shakespeare is known as the Bard of Avon and the father of English drama, the sweet swan of Avon and the Bard. Friends, it was Ben Jonson who called him the soul of the age, and also called about him that he knew small Latin and less Greek. Friends, it was Robert Greene who called him an upstart crow. Next is Robert Burns. Friends, he is known as the Bard of Ayrshire or the Bard of Scotland, and also known as the national poet of Scotland. In short, he is called Rabbi, and he is also known as the Plowman poet. Friends, next is Lindley Murray. He is known as the father of English grammar. Now, William Dunbar. He is known as the Chaucer of Scotland, and John Dryden. He is known as the father of English criticism. It was Dr. Samuel Johnson who called him the father of English criticism. Friends, next is William Blake, who is known as the mystic poet. Next is John Donne. John Donne is known as the poet of love, the metaphysical poet, and it was Dr. Samuel Johnson who called him the metaphysical poet. He is also known as the monarch of wit, and it was John Dryden who called him the monarch of wit. A phrase, he affects the metaphysics, was used by John Dryden in the context of John Donne. Friends, next is Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope is known as the mock heroic poet and the wasp of Twickenham. Next is Johannes Gutenberg. Friends, he is known as the father of printing press in Germany, and William Caxton is known as the father of English press in England. He is also known as the first English printer and the requel of the histories of Troy
was the first book translated into English and printed in 1473 in William Caxton Press. Next, we will talk about a great epic poet, John Milton. Friends, he is known as the great master of verse, and John Aubrey called him the Lady of Christ College. William Black called about him that he was the poet of Devil's Party, and he is also known as the master of grand style, the blind poet of England, the most famous poet for his epic poetry, and the English epic poet. Next, we will talk about a great nature poet, William Wordsworth. Friends, he is known as the worshipper of nature, and it was called him by himself. Matthew Arnold called him the highest priest of nature, and P.B. Shelley called him the poet of nature. Friends, William Wordsworth belongs to lake poets including Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Robert Southey. The phrase the egotistical sublime was used by John Keats in the context of William Wordsworth, and Robert Browning called him the lost leader. Friends, he is also known as the poet of childhood. Wordsworth and Coleridge is known as the father of Romanticism. Next is Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Friends, he is known as the poet of supernaturalism and an opium eater, the poet of imagination. Charles Lamb called about him that he was an archangel a little damaged. Next is Lord Byron. He is known as the rebel poet and also known as the romantic paradox. Friends, next is George Bernard Shaw. He is known as the greatest modern dramatist, the iconoclast, and he was the prominent member of the Fabian Society. Next, we will talk about Percy B.C. Shelley. Friends, he was called as Mad Shelley by his classmates in Eton College, and he is also known as the poet of hope and regeneration, and also known as the revolutionary poet. Jane Austen is known as an anti-romantic in Romantic age. Now, John Keats. John Keats is known as the poet of beauty and the poet of sensuousness. A phrase negative capability was used by John Keats in the context of Shakespeare, and next phrase egotistical sublime was also used by John Keats in the context of Wordsworth. Friends, he is known as the chameleon poet, and P.B. Shelley called about him that Keats was a Greek. Matthew Arnold also called about him that he is with Shakespeare. Friends, John Keats established the Hellenic style in English poetry. Next is Dr. Samuel Johnson. Friends, he is known as the father of historical criticism, and he coined the term metaphysical poets. A dictionary of the English language was written by Dr. Samuel Johnson, and it was published in 1755. In short, the dictionary is known as Johnson's Dictionary. Friends, he is also known as the first lexicographer. Now, Sigmund Freud. Friends, Sigmund Freud is known as a great psychoanalyst.
Next is Alfred Lord Tennyson. He is known as the representative of the Victorian era. The compromise used by Alfred Lord Tennyson in his works is known as Victorian Compromise, and it was between faith and reason. Walt Whitman called him the boss.
Tennyson was undoubtedly the stupidest was called by W.H. Auden. Next is Matthew Arnold. Touchstone method was given by Matthew Arnold in his essay Study of Poetry for the Critical Study of Poetry. Next is James Joyce. Friends, he is known as the father of English stream of consciousness novel, and the phrase stream of consciousness was first coined by William James in his book The Principles of Psychology, and the book was published in 1890. Next is Edgar Allan Poe. Friends, he is known as the father of English mysterious stories. Next we will talk about Robert Frost. Full name of Robert Frost is Robert Lee Frost, and he is known as the poet of terror and also known as the New England poet. Friends, a phrase "the sound of sense" was first used by Robert Frost in his sonnet Moving. Next is Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller is known as Mulk Raz Anand of America. Now Francisco Petrarch. Friends, he is known as the father of humanism and the father of Italian sonnet. Next is Thomas Yat. Thomas Yat is known as the father of English sonnet, and he is also known as the father of ottava rima in English. Thomas Yat also introduced the form of terza rima in English. Next is Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman is known as the father of free verse. He used free verse in his autobiography Leaves of Grass for the first time, and free verse is also known as verse libre. Friends, Walt Whitman is also known as the bird of democracy or the poet of democracy. Next is Henry Louis Vivian Desrosiers. Friends, he is known as the father of Indian Anglican sonnet. Next is Edmund Spenser. Friends, Edmund Spenser is known as the poet's poet, and it was Charles Lamb who called him the poet's poet. He is also known as the child of Renaissance, and he was the bridge between Renaissance and Reformation. Friends, Spenserian stanza is a stanza of 9 lines, and it was created by Edmund Spenser in his allegory The Fairy Queen. Next is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Friends, Ralph Waldo Emerson is known as the Seneca of America, and he is also known as the Sage of Concord. Next we will talk about Charles Lamb. The pseudonym of Charles Lamb was Elia, and the essays written by Charles Lamb is known as the Essays of Elia. Friends, Charles Lamb is known as the Prince of Essays, and E.V. Lucas called about him that he was the most lovable figure in literature. St. Coleridge also called him gentle-hearted Charles. Next is Mother Teresa. She is known as the boon of heaven. Next is Joseph Addison. He is known as the voice of humanist Puritanism, and he founded a magazine, the Spectator magazine, and it was co-founded with Richard Steele. Next is Thomas Nash. Friends, Thomas Nash is known as the young Juvenile. Next is Homer. He is known as the father of epic poetry and the blind poet. He is also known as the epic poet. Two most important classical epics, Iliad and Odyssey, were written by Homer. Next is Jacques Derrida. Deconstruction theory was given by Jacques Derrida. Next is Henrik Ibsen. Friends, he is known as the father of modern theatre, the father of realism, and also known as the father of problem play. Friends, Henrik Ibsen is known as the father of problem play, but problem play, the term was coined by Frederick Samuel Boss in his work Shakespeare and his predecessors. Next is Rabindranath Tagore. Friends, he is known as the Indian national poet, Gurudev, Kabi Guru, and his pen name is Bhanu Singh Thakur. Next is Nissim Ezekiel. Friends, he is known as the father of modern Indian English poetry. Next is Ben Jonson. Friends, the comedies written by Ben Jonson are known as comedy of humors, and some Cavalier poets including Robert Herrick, Richard Lawless, Sir John Suckling, and Thomas Carey, etc. were the followers of Ben Jonson, and these followers are known as Sons of Ben or Tribe of Ben. Next is Christopher Marlowe. He is known as the father of English tragedy. Now, George Atheris, he is known as the father of comedy of manners. Next is Julia Kristeva. The term intertextuality was coined by Julia Kristeva. And next is Soren Kierkegaard. He is known as the father of existentialism. The term existentialism was coined by Gabriel Marshall. Next is Thomas Stern Eliot. Friends, the theory of impersonality was given by Eliot, and the theory of objective correlative was also given by Thomas Stern Eliot in his prose work Hamlet and His Problems, that was published in 1919. The phrase dissociation of sensibility was also used by Thomas Stern Eliot in the essay The Metaphysical Poets, that was published in 1921. Next we will talk about Horace Walpole. He is known as the first Gothic novel writer, and the first Gothic novel that was written by Horace Walpole was The Castle of Otranto. Next is Samuel Richardson. Friends, he is known as the originator of the form of novel, and Charles Brockden Brown is known as the father of American novel. Next is Mulk Raj Anand. He is known as the father of Indo-Anglican fiction, and Michael Madhusudan Dutt is known as the father of Indo-Anglican drama, and William Dunlop is known as the father of American drama. Next is Kalidas. Friends, Kalidas is known as the Shakespeare of India. Ruskin Bond is known as the Wordsworth of India, and Macaulay is known as the father of Indian English learning. Next is Robert Browning. He is known as the poet of psychological love. Noam Chomsky is known as the father of modern linguistics, and Ferdinand de Saussure is known as the father of linguistics. Next is Dante Alighieri. Friends, he invented the form terza rima in his work The Divine Comedy. Next is Thomas Gray. He is known as the transitional poet and also considered as the graveyard poet. Next is Thomas Kidd. Friends, Thomas Kidd is known as the father of revenge tragedy, and the first revenge tragedy that was written by Thomas Kidd was the Spanish tragedy. It was published in 1587. Thanks for visiting our YouTube channel. Please like, share and do subscribe. Keep working hard. Thank you.